I'm going to read for you a chapter from the book The Red Lion from Maria Tzepes. This is one of the favorite books from Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he actually asks his children to read one of the chapters every single year as a reminder for their life. And the chapter is called the Kyilkhor, and I decided that I want to read this chapter for you because it has been really helpful for me in my life. First, I'll just write you the backside of the book so you know a little bit what it's about. The Red Lion, the Elixir of Eternal Life. The reader is taken back to 1553 when Hans Burgner, a coarse, impatient young man, searches for the Red Lion, an elixir set to confer immortality, and finally finds it. He ignores the warnings of taking the secret potion before his soul is sufficiently developed, murders his mentor, a kind and wise alchemist, and is immediately plummeted into a spiritual abyss of ceaseless torment. Through 5 lifetimes, he seeks to redeem himself until finally uncovering the true secret of transformation and eternal life. The Red Lion shows us that the immortality he killed for is not immortality of the body or gained by elixirs. Miss Tzepes, in this wonderful page-turner, teaches that people who love, cheat, or beat each other meet again in different roles and relationships, but with the same personalities they held before. And so with this reviewer and you, the reader, follow the hero through his lifetimes and through his extraordinary adventures, repeating his mistakes and trying desperately to learn and grow. Maria Tzepes has written a fantastic book, and you will have difficulty putting it down. More than that, The Red Lion will surely affect your life as it unveils its occult secrets. The Red Lion is special and not to be missed. So you might have heard I am not a native English speaker. You will definitely hear some accent, and some of the words which I will be pronouncing, I'll not be pronouncing correctly because some of the language is quite old. The book was written in 1946. But let's just get into it, and I hope you'll enjoy. Chapter 40, The Kyilkhor. In 1793, Karl von Hesse entrusted to me the education of his son Victor Amadeus. The boy, who was amiable and brilliant, had just turned 14, but there was an old spirit in that young boy. He was keenly interested in the occult, of following every path of learning thirstily. His knowledge was like the counterweighted lid of a treasure box. It sprang open at the first touch. It was as though I were merely reminding him of blurred memories. There was no trace of self-interest left in the boy. His aesthetic life cost him neither strain, repression, nor self-deception. He was simply indifferent to the temptations of the flesh. Working with Victor Amadeus was a beautiful and easy task. He not only walked obediently, he flew without effort, and his soaring intuition often left me behind. Soon I realized he was to be the great missionary of the future and began preparing him for his mission. I was also gradually taking over the correspondence of the order, a very important activity in such a far-flung organization. I learned the secret roster of members and was soon in contact with virtually every country that could be reached by mail. My personal studies were also moving satisfactorily. At this time I was preoccupied with animating symbols. Both alchemists and Oriental mystics use magic scripts to learn how to create certain symbolic beings. Thus they understand and experience the process of creation. This mystery is a small repetition of the great creation. Unlike the blind process of procreation and conception, this is conscious, immaculate conception of the spirit. It is the conception of an idea that can, with the help of the spiritual principle and the will, create karma and concentrate matter about itself. The original mystics performed this not by projection or transmutation, but by creating thought forces. They use certain diagrams like paintings of gods and demons and the basis of their work. This is the Tibetan prima materia, a diagram they call Kyilkhor. Saint Germain had given me one of these figures to animate so I could recognize and conquer my forces in this field. Every color, form, and spatial distribution within a Kyilkhor is important. This mystic creature sits or stands in the middle of a diagram made up of symbols expressing its individuality. The animation of the diagram corresponds to the transmutation. It is the custom of the Tibetan mystics to give some sort of magic assignment to their animated Kyilkhor and to judge by the way it is executed whether and to what extent they have succeeded in conceiving the idea and implanting it. If this operation is executed properly, the spirit or demon of the Kyilkhor becomes truly alive and performs assigned tasks without fail. My Kyilkhor was a life-size statue of a Tibetan sorcerer. Saint Germain had sculpted it from clay and painted it. It was a startlingly lifelike statue of a Tibetan sitting in the lotus position. There was a strange, withdrawn smile on the thin lips under the high cheekbones and slanted dark eyes. My first task was to conquer the feeling of repulsion it aroused in me. The more I looked at the figure and concentrated on it, the more malicious its expression seemed. The eyes seemed to stare at me dully, evilly. Slowly I became convinced that this sorcerer must have been a black magician in his native Tibet. The forces of destruction seemed concentrated in him. I didn't understand why my master had chosen him, but I could not decline the assignment. I eliminated my repulsion. It was 13 months before that rigid clay first quivered with the breath of life, and another 9 weeks before he was breathing regularly. There he sat on the rush mat opposite me, warmed by my radiated heat and pulsating with my force in his veins. But he was still mute and motionless. I will not dwell on the bizarre and startling details of this huge experiment. It required the total concentration of my forces and abilities and involved disheartening relapses. When the life force is put to such deadly strain and concentrated on a single object, it keeps trying to slip away, and mysterious short circuits happen. Then the lifeless matter, which has begun to live in the mystic excitement of creation, promptly dies. Nor will I give the details of the tiring but stimulating watch that must be kept on the life flame, but this can be understood only after long study and experiment. I will merely say that this experience is a milestone, one of the ultimate and more dangerous trials. There are now a good many Tibetan works on the Kyilkhor available in European languages for those who are interested. It was 2 years before the Kyilkhor's eyes showed signs of awareness. It was 3 years before his body and limbs began to move. Now the way he held his head changed, and his eyes began to follow me as I walked about in the room. Observing this, I called to him, and he got up and began to follow me with slow, unsteady steps. He would creep behind me throughout the castle, then follow me back into the meditation room and sit down automatically in his place. He grew stronger every day. Now it was time for him to learn his name. Lu Gyat Khan. This means 8 serpents. I repeated it countless times in front of him. Lu Gyat Khan, Lama of the Red Sect, who dwells in Mithong Gat Ka, the invisible mountaintop. Lu Gyat Khan. His mouth had moved. He quiveringly tried to repeat the name, but no sound came from his throat. His mute lips began forming the name more and more definitely. Then a soft hissing sound erupted from him. Lu Gyat Khan. It was a muffled whisper, now growing stronger and stronger as it vibrated through living vocal cords. The word has hoarse and unmodulated but fully understandable. Again and again I repeated, "You are Lu Gyat Khan. You are Lu Gyat Khan." He would repeat automatically. Then one day he said that I had been waiting for. I am Lu Gyat Khan. It was not imitation, it was his own thought from his own animated personality. It was elated with unspeakable jubilation. At least I had arrived at the peak of my creative powers and acquired the key of life that Isis, the Great Mother, holds in her left hand. I was mistaken. This was only half the task, for Saint Germain had had a reason for choosing that particular statue. Spring was approaching, and the whole world seemed filled with its swelling life force. The branches were still bare, but the bark shone with renescent sap. Even the apparently dead humus poured out disquieting fragrances that disturbed the sleep of young animals. By now, the Kyilkhor was moving about without me and performing the chores I assigned. At night, he would sit in my room and guard me with watchful eyes while I slept. One unusually warm March night during full moon, I was aroused suddenly by hearing my name called. Cornelius! It became louder. Cornelius! I sat up and saw the Kyilkhor standing beside my bed, looking at me strangely, knowing that the anxiety that came upon me was the most terrible danger of my practice. I did not allow it to overcome me. Calmly, I ordered him to leave, but he wouldn't. Cornelius, he began, leaning closer to me. Abruptly, his voice was raised in malevolent joy. Are you afraid, Cornelius? He raised his right hand, and I felt his reptilian touch on my chest above my open nightgown. The fingers groped upward convulsively, then found a grip on my throat. I didn't move or let my panic-stricken life instinct cause me to struggle or cry for help. Instead, I looked straight into his eyes, blocking the fear that rose up within me. I felt the pressure of the cold fingers and the pulsation of my bursting veins. The pounding of my heart seemed to fill the universe, but I looked him in the eye. Let me go free. He spoke practically in my face. I did not answer. He relaxed his grip slightly, and a subtly imploring note came into his voice. Let me be free to go out into the moonlight garden where the animals are wailing in the pain of lust and the buds are bursting through the branches. Let me go out the gate and walk along the highways among the people with their warm colors and odors. Cut the umbilical cord and let me be a separate individual. I promise you will never hear of me again. Let me live and you also will live. I did not answer. Slowly his grip relaxed until his hand slid off me. He straightened up and began cursing me in a sorrowful mumble. Unlawful creator, be damned. He was walking away from the bed now, but his disturbing plaints continued. What kind of joy can I have? What kind of life? No heat can warm me, no light can comfort me, no one can vouch for me or liberate me. I don't even have anybody to pray for me. No one strengthens me or defends me against this tyrant. Who could break down this prison? Why was I aroused to be aborted alive? The wailing, yearning voice was beginning to sap my internal resolve. Aching pity began to seep through the dam I had erected against every disturbing feeling. I found myself pitying my own materialized thoughts that I had formed into a fictitious being who was now rebelling to have his own way. I knew the situation was absurd and these temptations dangerous, but still I faltered. I genuinely felt sorry for this projected part of my ego. While doubt and remorse were surging through me, the Kyilkhor suddenly stopped and turned around. Again, I saw the evil in his yearning face. Then the current of my waning force rushed into him, and a single leap brought him back to my bedside. Now, give me your whole being. Your veins are open and the blood is flowing. Blood, heat, and life, all flowing into me. You will be drained, and I shall have the power. Power. He became incoherent with intoxicated lust. Suddenly he grasped the heavy marble lamp from the bedside and wielded it over my head. I resigned myself and waited quietly for the inevitable. I was not afraid, but I felt no more pity for him. My emotional storm had ceased. The lamp fell with a thud to the pillow bedside beside me, cutting my forehead slightly as it dropped from weak, hesitant fingers. My forces had returned to me with my inner balance. As the oil poured out on the bed, the Kyilkhor began staggering, fell to his knees, then fell on the floor. I got up and lit a candle, then turned him over and felt his heart. His heartbeat was very weak. I lifted him and put him on the bed. As I moved, a drop of blood fell from my wound onto his face. He started convulsively and opened his eyes. "Thank you," he murmured. Then his eyes closed again. As for me, I was totally exhausted from my terrible struggle. I had to sit down because my knees were shaking. Meanwhile, the phantom I had conjured up and for the time being defeated lay on my oil-soaked bed. Finally, I got up and went to the room beside the laboratory to rest on a rush mat. The mat across from the stand from which the Kyilkhor had descended. I rolled up in a few blankets and fell into a deep sleep. I was awakened at dawn by a feeling that someone was watching me. Then I saw that the stand was no longer empty. Apparently the Kyilkhor was back in his place, peacefully meditating. Here we go again, I thought wearily. Here we go again, and who knows how many times I'm going to have to endure it before it consumes me. Internally I groaned for Saint Germain, the magus who had given me a test that seemed beyond my abilities. Then my eyes cleared and I almost cried out. It was Yidam who sat on the stand. Seeing I was awake, he rose and bowed to me, then handed me a letter. Then he left without speaking. The sight of the letter fired me with such hope that I didn't try to stop him. I thought I could see him before he left, but he left before I could see him. Now I tore open the letter. "Kill him, Cornelius," the words flashed from the page. Saint Germain hadn't bothered with greeting. "If you bring a demon to life without being able to kill him, you face a greater, more complex danger than death. The Kyilkhor you have created and named is a cameo of the dark powers. It has brought back a mummified black cult that existed beyond your memory, though you yourself nurtured it at one time. It is the guardian of the threshold of the gate of your personal sanctuary and represents the most ancient bondage. You must dissolve that bondage." A Kyilkhor must always be killed, else he becomes a tyrant. There is profound meaning in this construction and destruction process. The divine truth that the world is your creation. It was you who brought it into existence. You must learn to break it down and dissolve it, or you will never be free of its control. A Kyilkhor must be killed by it saint, be it saint, messiah, or God. You have forced him into matter and woven a body of death and illusion around him. The world itself, in all its darkness and demonic chaos, is nothing but an unconsciously created Kyilkhor. The entities which created it lost their keys, and that is why they were defeated. Their Kyilkhor became stronger than they, and it tormented them. Their own lewdness and greed produced depraved images, and their uncontrolled imaginations filled these things with the elixir of life. The demons began to live, became independent, and made their creators their slaves. For a Kyilkhor must be served not only until the decay of one's current body, but even after death and through future incarnations. It is a Moloch of passion, and it is insatiable. Weakness and fear have created a Kyilkhor of fear, sickness, and death, a monster that sucks up the most precious creative forces and uses them against trapped human beings. If you learn the key to creating and destroying the Kyilkhor, you will have the key to your own liberation and victory over the world. Now I leave you to your own counsel. You are alone. You have begun to travel a separate road. Alone you created, and alone you must return your creation to its original elements. The disciple is alone during every crisis and every solution. Be careful, strong and brave, and persevere in your efforts. Remember, you cannot turn back. You are in the middle of the sea of mysteries and must reach the other shore. You may reach this shore in years, months, or centuries. It all depends on you. But beware of killing the Kyilkhor. This demon is even more terrible when he is invisible. To rid yourself of him, your dagger must pierce all three of his bodies. You must burn him with a fire that will consume him in all three worlds. If you can annihilate the Kyilkhor, you will receive more powerful forces than you have ever had during your earthly life, and these forces will serve you obediently. But if you fail, you will not see me for a long time. You can summon me only by solving your problem. Then I will come and initiate the Magister. Now I heard shuffling steps approaching. I turned to the door, which was opening slowly. The Kyilkhor stumbled in like a sleepwalker, my dried blood still daubing his forehead. He sat down on the stand, breathing heavily. Occasionally a shudder racked his frame. "Give me some warm food. I'm cold," he mumbled. His misery filled me with premature hope. I had forgotten that it was my strength and emotions that fed him. My warm joy was his sweet drink, and my hope was his medicine. His face turned a healthier color, and his eyes opened. His breathing cleared, and he sighed with pleasure. "Ah, that's what I needed. That's good." The weeks that followed were both difficult and terrifying. Vainly I tried to block his ability to feed on my forces. I could not succeed. If I destroyed part of him with days of grueling effort, he would rebuild it in a few hours by tapping my forces when I relaxed. If I began to hope he was getting weaker, the hope would strengthen him. If I felt discouraged by his renewed strength, he grew yet stronger. It was a Sisyphean task. And as the months passed, I reached a point where I no longer cared about any changes in his condition. Thus, for a long time, we were at an impasse. He lived and moved beside me like a mirror image, and my concentrated efforts couldn't diminish his vital force. I was depressed by this tenacity and thus had to fight a battle within and without. If I succumbed either to my creature or my own despair, I was lost. My health was beginning to suffer. The constant tension made me lose my appetite, and I lost weight. The outside world ceased to exist for me. The Kyilkhor became a hateful monomania. The land about me, the castle, the quiet figures of my parents, none were real except he. My parents, of course, knew about the dark waves that threatened to drown me, but they could do nothing. How many ways I tried to cut myself off from the Kyilkhor to keep him from draining me spiritually. Nothing worked. I would painfully restore my balance of indifference, only to find it immediately threatened with upset, irritation and anger, pride at my defenses, and I felt I could not hold them off much longer. What I feared most was that my murderous hate would overcome me and I would kill him. I wanted to stick a knife into that breathing, vigorous body, even if it meant my own death. The insane desire pulsed through my emaciated body and shaken nerves. Finish him off, squeeze out his life, or beat him to death. I was close to emotional collapse. Naturally, this made him stronger and even more self-confident. I saw I would have to give it up. I could not find the connection that linked us. The current flowed between us no matter what I did. I had to face the fact that I would lose. I was overcome with shame and misery. Then I thought of all the trials I had gone through and what my future would be. My parents and Saint Germain would be so disappointed in me. I had failed the great trial, and now I would again suffer the dark, bitter fate of the fallen novice. The Kyilkhor had simply gotten the better of me, and he would fulfill his murderous passion and evil desire for autonomy. He would kill me so he could live, and I would lose my body, the fruitful environment of the castle, my parents, and my memory. I would have to start all over again, groping blindly, and everything the Kyilkhor did in the meantime would be my responsibility. For I had conjured up and loosed a monster on the world. I had given a form, name, and personality to a blind, inexperienced force complex which now sought the crude experiences of life because I had not given him my intellect. All he had was a life-filled body and an elemental spirit, a demon whose avid will was bent on the emotions and passions. But if I killed him instead of waiting for him to kill me, the situation was even worse, for he could then possess me. This demon would force me to do his will, use my body for his debauchery, and drive me to death or madness, and I still would not be free of him. I was in the worst trap I had been in since my alliance with Homunculus. When I realized I was well and truly defeated, my anger vanished. I decided I would never raise a hand against my creature, regardless of the consequences. I would rather be the victim. Now I decided to end the tension of waiting. I would confront the inevitable. I did not bid my parents farewell, for I felt I had lost that right. I simply locked myself in the meditation room with the Kyilkhor. I sat down on the bulrush mat, not afraid but simply very wary. There was the Kyilkhor, sitting across from me. I could feel his burning glance, but I didn't look at him. I wasn't interested in him. I was looking inside myself. I knew there could be no help from anyone else. My inner space was filled with still, grey water, dark and rejecting. It would take effort to penetrate it, and I did not want to make that effort. I didn't even struggle as sleepiness overcame me and my inner landscape blurred into darkness. My awareness slipped imperceptibly into the dark waters like a corpse. A strange dream came to me in this deep sleep. I saw the meditation room and its image reflected in a mirror. The room itself was dark, but its mirror image shone with clear light. I saw myself sitting wearily in the shadowed room, my head hung down in sleep. But the mirror image showed me bolt upright, shining with the ecstasy of meditation. The Kyilkhor sat on his stand in the dark room, positively glowing with health, and he watched me like a tiger. But the stand in the mirror image was quite empty, and I was astonished. Now the Kyilkhor in the dark room got up and approached the sleeper on the rush mat with curved fingers. I was frightened and would have shouted to wake the victim, but the meditator in the other room turned and put his finger up to his lips. But he'll kill him in his sleep. I wanted to shout this aloud, but I was in the grip of a helpless paralysis. The meditator shook his head, then pointed to the empty stand. He may not be there, I responded desperately, but he's certainly here. I saw the Kyilkhor's fingers close on the neck of the sleeping figure and choke off his breath. Then I felt my own breath being choked off. How could someone who doesn't exist commit murder? My alter ego spoke sharply from the mirror image. Why do you keep saying he exists? You have made him a monomania. Don't you know it is your belief in him that makes him invincible? Your belief is his elixir. If you take it from him, he'll be nothing but lifeless matter. Take it away. Release and new light flowed through me and an immense gratitude. I could breathe freely now and stare up at the Kyilkhor who held my defenseless body in his merciless hands. How could a ridiculous statue strangle me? How could a nightmare persecute me and make me run? My thoughts swooped down upon him. You're nothing but smoke, fog, and cloud. My imagination alone has given you meaning and form. I have done enough shadow boxing with myself. Disperse, ye elemental parasites. I hereby take back unto myself the energy and force I had loosed and dissolve the bond between us. I now take back that part of myself which I had released. You have no existence of your own. Your breath is my breath. Your blood is my blood. You have no independent will. It is my will that works in you. I now withdraw these things from you. What are you now? Lifeless matter I borrowed and now return. Return to your stand and stiffen in the pose your creator commanded. The Kyilkhor dropped his limp hands and shuffled to his stand. When he sat down and faced me, I saw rage, terror, and desperation in his face. Gradually, his features froze into position, but first he gave a horrible yell of protest. The painful scream became more and more inarticulate, but it was an intolerable sound and jerked me awake. I was astounded to find that this horrible sound came from my own mouth. As soon as I recognized this, the noise ceased and my throat burned from the exertion. The Kyilkhor sat motionless in his original pose, and his painted colors were dimly visible in the dusky light. I got up and went over to touch him. I touched cold, hard matter. The paint had peeled off one place on his face, and the yellow clay underneath it crumbled. And thus the master came to me again and gave me what I earned, the total knowledge of things and processes. At least I had achieved what I had sought for centuries, had killed for, suffered for, fought with demons, and died to attain. I became a magister and was accepted by the masters. I had reached the inner sanctuary. Yet the person who was initiated had nothing in common with the greedy, confused, and temperamental Hans Burgner who stumbled after eternal life. True, the mystical process had begun in his soul. He was the lead that had been thrown into the crucible, heated by the fires of centuries and transformed by experiences and consequences into Cornelius von Grotte, the Magister. Now he had no more worldly desires, and now that he had acquired the power, he no longer wished to use it. But he had one more debt to pay, and it stood in front of him. Now the Magister stood before the last step. The next to the last step, however, involves lengthy tasks which demand great patience, and one can never ask when he will reach the end. He must first perform certain selfless duties that might take decades or more than a century. For the difference between a magister and magus is that between an industrious talent and a genius. I spent my days quietly with my parents, working hard. I performed exercises at dawn in the early morning. I worked in the laboratory, then I worked with Victor Amadeus. This was more pleasure than effort. After that, I had lunch with my parents, then strolled in the park studying rocks, trees, plants, and insects. The late afternoon was spent working on the mail of the order, and the evening belonged to reading, music, and the company of my parents. In those days of crystal clear perfection, I blocked out the past and future, for I knew this was just a passing rest to strengthen me for new events. I utilized my time thoroughly. We hardly noticed the turmoil of the French Revolution, which was then shaking the civilized world. Of course, we were aware of the various events, for we were in contact with many skillful and influential people who were doing everything they could for the victims. They could not, of course, interfere with individuals or group karma. They were successful only where higher law permitted it. So this is the end of this chapter, The Kyilkhor, from the Red Lion, and I'm not going to draw any conclusions from this because I hope you find how it is relevant in your life right now. And I know it was not always perfectly read by me, but I hope you understood the essence and that you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching.